Welcome. I'm Jeffrey Sachs, and I'd like to think for tonight I'll introduce myself as the Menahel of Yeshivat Hamivtar, even though in life I've done other things. It's Elul, and we all know that even the fish are trembling, as we have all been trembling this week. I've had a very long and very profitable, spiritually profitable, emotionally profitable relationship with Rabbi Todd Ebner, Zichrono Livracha, since I entered the yeshiva as the yeshiva moved to Efrat in 1988. He was first and foremost and always a teacher, and then through some odd paradox of my life, he became a colleague, a friend, a partner at our work at Atid and WebYeshiva, but always, always a mentor, a chavrusa. I'm going to say a few words of introduction by way of leading into Rabbi Brovender's hesped. Rabbi Ebner often said that he spoke in hakdamot. He never spoke long, but until he got to what he was saying, there were a few things he wanted to say first. So you'll forgive me if imitating him, I'll say a few divrei hakdama. First of all, I would encourage everyone, those of you online with us here in WebYeshiva, those that are listening along to the live feed on Facebook, and those that will be watching this archive at some point recorded in the future, join us on WebYeshiva.org/Hamivtar, where our friend Amichai Tzipor has been working tirelessly to upload so many of the recordings of those great shiurim, many of them by Rabbi Ebner. This week we've been focusing on getting all of his Elul material up. WebYeshiva.org/Hamivtar will house as many of those old recordings as we are able to get our hands on and to digitize and to put online. And of course, those of you from the yeshiva days, or those of you that just felt somehow connected to the yeshiva, you should follow along on the Yeshivat Hamivtar Facebook page to keep updated of things. As I said a moment ago, we've been hoping to have a yeshiva reunion for a long time, and unfortunately we're gathering under these circumstances instead. Last Sunday night at the Hespedim, I debated whether or not to follow along to the Kfura on Har HaZeitim, or to leave to get to the wedding of a student to which I was already late. And as I was debating what to do, Dmut Diyukno Shel Rav Ebner came before me and said, with those eyebrows raised and that hand like this, and he said, Sachs, you don't miss a student's simcha. And of course, I knew that's what he would have wanted me to do, and that's what he would have done for any of us. So I sped off to the wedding and to catch the tail end of the chuppah. After chuppah, we were davening Mariv outside. It was that night of the full lunar eclipse, and everyone had, one eye on the siddur and one eye to the heavens. And I'm not making this up. As we got to L'David Hashem Ori, the moon entered total eclipse and went dark. L'David Ebner Ori, Orenu, and the light went out. And I thought that it really was Lid David, and that he really could have made a hell of a poem out of that occurrence. One of the things that I'm most proud of in my professional life was encouraging him to do something serious with his poetry, to explore how he might more fully utilize his poetry in his teaching, his own poetry, along, of course, with all of the classics that he not only loved but carried around inside him. This resulted in the Library of Everything, his first of 3 collections of poetry, which not only contained the poetry but also contained short essays in which he unpacked the sources he was playing on. And those of us who sat in the shiurim and the sichot, and of course, the Kol Nidrei night, the 10th parak of Tshuva on Kol Nidrei night, will see in his poetry what he so often expressed in prose. He opens the library of everything by reminding his readers what William Butler Yeats said: "We make out of the quarrel with others rhetoric, but of the quarrel with ourselves, poetry." I think his effectiveness as a Rebbe is somehow connected with those quarrels. Quarrels not in the sense of machlokas, but of struggle. He struggled alongside us in the shir room. He struggled alongside us in the Beis Medrash, and in the thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of private conversations. There was no one that he didn't make time for, as he held our hand and as he poked us with that stick as we worked through our quarrels and struggles. I know that at two of the very darkest moments of my own life, one professional and one personal, he was right there at my side. And I know almost every one of us would say the same. I should add that his devotion to his students, Harehem Kivanav, his selflessness with his time, and the fact that he was never, not once, ever in his whole life late by even a second for anything at all, is all the more remarkable when we consider that for many long years, he was doing all of that while juggling the awesome responsibilities of being a single father to 3 special children, remarkable children, raising them as little kids and as teenagers. And those of us that know what's involved in that understand how all the more remarkable was that Hare Anu Kivanav, and he made the same amount of time and energy and attention to all of us. But we all know that the poetry of that great neshama, the davening, the nigunim, the merciless, endless prodding for self-growth and improvement were born of the quarrel and struggle he had with himself, and his candid confessions of his own struggles. And we received only but a glimpse. This he used also as a teaching moment, showing us how internal conflicts, even moments of self-doubt, personal struggle, are the sources of true poetic insight and creativity. These insights give rise to the poetry, giving us all hope and a model for poetically resolving our own quarrels with ourselves, each in our own way. One imagines that one of the last thoughts to go through that remarkable mind, as it raged against the dying of the light, was, damn it, I had the hesped already prepared for Brovender, and now I won't be able to give it. And now it falls to you, Rabbi Brovender, to help us understand Rabbi Ebner's legacy and his enduring message and teaching to us, the talmidim. And I'll turn the microphone over to you in a moment. But if the outpouring of grief and memory that we were all witness to this week on Facebook and on WhatsApp and on emails and in countless conversations that I know I've had with some people I haven't been in touch with, old friends, old chavrusas, old talmidim who I haven't been in touch with in many years. And I'm sure so many of you have had those conversations as well with chaverim l'safsal, with rabbeim. If it indicates anything, we're mourning, of course, Rabbi Ebner, but I think we're also, all of us, marking an end to what we all understood was the most remarkable of institutions, Yeshivat Hamivtar. It's important to note, and Rabbi Brovender, you are always the first to admit, that if the so-called Brovender method, the secret sauce, the magic of the Brovender method, was indeed conceived by Rabbi Brovender together with, we should mention, of course, Rabbi J. Miller, Zichrono Livracha, and that the brand name was Brovender method, that brand name was just coined by some marketing guru. It was, in fact, Rabbi Ebner all those years in the level 1 classroom who made it mean something in pedagogical practice for myriad students. And proof of this can be seen in the Facebook comments to the letter that he would distribute to the students at the beginning of the year. He would distribute to the Shana Aleph level 1 students, which I posted on Facebook earlier this week. The fact that no teacher living today could write or distribute such a letter says something about the problems of contemporary Torah education, and perhaps why Yeshivat Hamivtar no longer exists. In the letter, he warned, the thought of remaining an ignoramus should be sufficiently sobering and motivate your behavior and your allocation of time to learning. You will know that everything is going all right when you find that you don't have enough time in the day and night to prepare and review. And he cautioned that failure to follow his advice will result in, I will be bothered. And more importantly, you will remain an Am Haaretz, forever consigned to murky art scroll type of learning existence. Torah is about effort and sweat. Nobody sane would sacrifice the opportunity to experience the joy of real learning for the easy path of paperback Judaism. That so many of those talmidim who passed through Hamivtar in its various gilgulim over the course of nearly 40 years, that so many have gone on to make important contributions in the widest imaginable variety of work in Jewish life and learning, is the best proof of what you, Rabbi Brovender, set out to do, together with Rabbi Ebner and together with so many other incredible mechanchim and rabbonim, many of whom are with us tonight. And those accomplishments are not to be gainsaid. To have sat among them at the Rebbe's table for lunch in a miftar was among the greatest personal and professional joys of my career. Watching Rabbi Brovender and Rabbi Ebner go at it day after day. We are almost exactly 25 years to the day that I stood side by side with Rabbi Ebner very late on a Thursday night in the emergency room in Hadassah Hospital as Rabbi Brovender was brought in after his tour of Beit Jala, exactly 25 years ago. We all remember those terrible days, even as our own days sometimes seem little brighter. To have witnessed the emotion, the care, the love that Rabbi Ebner felt for Rabbi Brovender on that night was indescribable. That we, the talmidim, were the beneficiaries of that special partnership, friendship, those many years, should be obvious. Rabbi Brovender, we turn to you. Rabbi Brovender, we're going to unmute you. There you go.
Oh, thank you. I'm charged to say something at this auspicious time, but those of us who were present at the Levaya and then participated in the Shiva and listened to everybody telling stories, and I could even say, adding on now Rabbi Sachs and his comments, I wondered what exactly I could say that would clarify something, that would make it more palpable for the community. And I came up with two topics that relate to Rabbi Ebner, which I would like to expand upon a little bit. The two topics are, the first topic is love, and the second topic is storytelling. Let's start from the first, the topic of love. You know, this is the month of Elul. And the month of Elul is the month of Ani Lidodi, Lidodi Li. It's a special time, and it's caught on. People say that. I mean, they may not think about it so much, but they say that. Like, as though love is an easy thing. Everybody can do it. You don't have to spend too much time reflecting upon it. And then you grow up and you find out that there's actually a mitzvah in the Torah, le'ahav et HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to love God. And they say some people might question how you do that, or why you do that, but they settle into the notion that it has something to do with mitzvot. If you listen to what God wants you to do, so then you are doing it. But still, it comes up again year after year. Ani l'dodi v'dodi li, and I can't help but wonder who's actually doing it, who's getting there, who is getting there. So Rabbi Ebner came in Aliyah, and he went straight to the yeshiva, to Yeshivat Hamivtar, and became a member of the staff on day one, his day one, not the yeshiva's day one. And I have to say about Rabbi Ebner that his love for the yeshiva, for the students, for the adjunct teachers, the primary teachers, his love for all of them was something that for me is noteworthy. Imagine being in love with an institution. And his love comprised his idea of what Talmud Torah was, what teaching Torah was, what struggles with the Torah are. All of that was the love that Rabbi Ebner expressed through Yeshivat Hamivtar. And as I think it was said previously, it was a privilege to sit next to Rabbi Ebner when he was just looking out of the Beit Midrash and looking at the students and thinking about what had to be done. It taught me something about love. Not that I'm a big expert, but I think that Rabbi Ebner was willing to share that with me. Like he's saying to me, just try a little harder. As it says in that famous letter, try a little harder. You'll get it. You'll get it. And I tried, and I'm not sure that I got it, but I think I got a little. So the first thing I wanted to tell you about Rabbi Ebner was that he knew about Ava. He knew about love. He knew about the love for his wife, for his family, for his children, for the people he knew, for all of that. But he also had a special degree of love for the yeshiva. It's true. Rabbi Ebner loved the yeshiva. And the yeshiva loved him because that's the way of love. You can't love into an empty barrel. You can only love when you are compensated, when you get the love in return. And that's the pshat of Ani l'dodi v'dodi li. You have a test. Are you loving? Do you express the love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Well, what do you get in return? If you get it in return, then that's really love. And that's what we learned from Rabbi Ebner. That you can have love for a yeshiva, for a project, for an undertaking, for Talmud Torah. You can love them all. You just have to set your mind to it. The second topic that I wanted to share with you was storytelling. It really hasn't been brought up, but Rabbi Ebner was a great storyteller. He was such a good storyteller that I know we would get together sometimes, even in more recent years, and he would say to me, "You remember the story? You remember the story?" And of course, I sort of did remember the story. But I always said, "No, I don't remember the story. Could you just say it over again?" I love to hear him tell the story. And there was no end to it. He'd say it again and again and again. And what is a story, after all? What is a story? A story, many of you read stories about the ancient world or the medieval world, but it doesn't really mean that much. It's a story. It's a story. But when Rabbi Ebner told the story, we were both in the story. He was in the story and I was in the story. He decided who he would be and he decided who I would be. And that's how it was in the story. Every story was not just a lesson. Every story he told was not just a lesson, a musar, a scale, an idea. It was an integrated IA production. It was happening. It was happening when he told the story. So I wanted to share a story. I mean, not because I'm a talmid of Rabbi Ebner's in storytelling. Not at all. No competition. But I think I could start a story and we could imagine how he would end it. And the story that I wanted to start to tell you about is a story that sort of appears in Shir HaShirim Rabbah, which is a medrash, which contains all kinds of alternate things. The Shir HaShirim Rabbah also includes the medrash, the Shir HaShirim. Shir HaShirim Rabbah. In Shir HaShirim Rabbah, there's sort of a story that's lacking details. So we'll make a few details, and the story begins this way. Yusta Chayata de Tziporim. Yusta is his name. I don't know if he was Jewish or not. But Yusta is not a well-known Jewish name, so you could conclude whatever you wish. Yusta Chayata de Tziporim. Tziporim is a town not far from Tiberia. I can't tell you the longitude exactly. I could look it up. But, I didn't look it up. He was a chayat. Chayat is a tailor. But, like every mikzoah, and like every undertaking, there are levels. There are high-class tailors, and there are lower-class tailors. So Yusta, he was a lower-class tailor, which meant that he didn't get jobs to make fancy suits and uniforms for the police or the officers or the governors of the town. He was more like buttons. The button fell off. You had to get it sewed on again. There was a rip in your coat, so you had to get it closed again. That was Yusta. He was good at that. He knew how to sew on a button. He knew how to patch up a coat. That's where he earned a living in Tziporim. He had a kind of a corner where he sat that everybody knew who he was. And Yusta came and he sat there and he would take the work and would come. Everything he would do, he'd get a couple of pennies. And that's how he lived. Yusta got up one day and decided, why am I doing this? Why am I spending my time sewing on buttons and patching up clothing? I'm going to go to the big city. And I'm going to find out, I don't know which big city he went to, but he went to a big city with a lot of noble people, personalities, and people with a high-class standard of living. And Nus Yusta realized that there were no high-class tailors in the town. There had been, but they either left or died. And here's Yusta, able to make a mark in the world of tailors, not in Sipporin. There he wasn't able to do it, but in this new place that he had gotten to, he was able to become a really high-class tailor. He made suits and hats and pants and earned a living. And finally, he decided that the time had come for him to make a suit for himself. And he did that. And he got dressed up in the finery that was known at that time. He used to. And he would walk around, he'd come close to the palace, the palace of the king or the palace of the governor. He came close to we walked around there and people saw him and they didn't know exactly who he was. And finally, he was invited in to share a meal because they all saw that he was dressed with this kind of finery that only could be worn by an impressive personality. So Yusta, by changing his clothing, he became a new person. He adopted the mannerisms of the rich and the well-appointed, and he was able to convince the people around him that he was one of them. And he solved this problem and that problem and the other problem, and they invited him in, and he came in and he ate with the governor. And the governor was so impressed by Yusta. After all, he used to spend most of his life as a simple person learning simple things. And sometimes when a king asks a simple question, there's nobody there to answer it. If you want to conquer the land, the king of Egypt can do it, but if you want to give out a flour to a variety of people, you need somebody with a different kind of skill. And suddenly, Yusta was an important person in this new city to which he had gone. So the king said to him, "Oh, we're so grateful for the way you've treated us and the wisdom that you've shared with us. I'll give you any wish that you might have. Just tell me what you need, and I'll give it to you." And Yusta said, "I would really like to go back to my hometown and become the Duke in charge of the city." The king said, "Oh, we got off easy. No problem. Which is your town?" He said, "Tzipori." "Oh, Tzipori, it's yours. Here's the letter. Here's the signature. Take it with you. Go to Tzipori and do what you want to do." So he did that. Went to Tzipori. He rented a big house. He lived at the edge of the best neighborhood. He had, again, made for himself clothing that he wore. And then he decided to take a walk around town, where he remembered the places that he saw, the places that he knew. And at the first, nobody recognized him. Nobody would think that the tailor would come back looking like the ruler. So they didn't recognize him. First he went around, then he went back and went back. And finally somebody, an old man, in one of the little stores that were near the entrance to the city, said, "Isn't that him? Isn't that Yusta? Isn't that Yusta?" So the story is told in the Shira Rabbah as follows. They asked him and they said, "Are you Yusta?" And you said, yeah, that's me. And they were amazed. Yusta, you left with nothing and you come back as the king of the city. How did you do that? How did you manage it? And in the story, as it is told, Yusta said, I don't really know. I don't really know how I did it. And then Rabbi Ebner would say, that was the terrible spot of the story. What do you mean you didn't know? You lost all those years doing less than you could have done, and you didn't know? And you don't know now? That was Rabbi Ebner, and that was the letter that Rabbi Ebner wrote that was mentioned previously by Rabbi Sachs. Rabbi Ebner used the story to tell us that you could make a big mistake. You could think that things come to you accidentally, unimportantly, without methodology, without being into it, so to speak, without working hard, without accepting responsibility. But it's not true. For all of those things, you don't get anything. It's only for the hard work that you put in and for the goals that you set up for yourself and the achievements that you're able to record. That's what you get. That's what you get. So you could say it's another form of love. If you do it, learn the Torah, do the mitzvot, maintain the standards, then you get, it's not always kingship that you get, but your attitude, your understanding, your feeling about yourself, your ability to make things meaningful. All of those things are in the teachings of Rabbi Ebner. So I don't know if the story was a good story or a bad story. I know that Rabbi Ebner would have made it a great story. And before we leave, I asked Rabbi Sachs, Rabbi Rackover sent me a 2-minute recording of Rabbi Ebner's shir on Kitabo. Kitabo is this week's parasha. This week's parasha, so if it's in with Elul, with Kitabo, with Rabbi Ebner, 2 minutes, please listen. Are we going to get it?
Yes, one moment, it's coming up. Ezra, are you there with the clip?
In Sheni of Parshat Kitavo, we have the mitzvah of vidui mater, which literally translated is to confess what one has done with the matrot for the 3 years of the Shemitah cycle, during which masrot, shumot and masrot are required. Now, we would expect, knowing what vidui is, to confess, well, we haven't done it exactly right. We didn't give it properly to the Ani, or we didn't take it properly to Yerushalayim. We didn't treat it with the proper kedusha that it's supposed to be treated with. But if you just read the psukim on the vidui mater, the confession of mater, you see that what is being said, in fact, is what the person says is, I did everything properly. I did what I was supposed to do. I didn't do this wrong and I didn't do that wrong. Al pi chasidut, we learn from here a very, very important concept. And that is, we're in a time, especially a time now of Elul of Tshuva, and we know that the critical element in Tshuva that many people are not aware of is vidui, confession of sin. One can say that in his own words, ashamnu, al chait, however one expresses it, but you've got to verbalize it. But when you say vidui, generally speaking, you always say what you did wrong. There's nothing, ashamnu, pagandu, kadalu, there's nothing right about it. So al pi Hasidut, it is suggested that while it's certainly proper, it is certainly proper beyond any doubt, of course, to recognize one's fault, to recognize one's failure. In truth, in vidui, one should also take note, and then even perhaps one should begin in confession by noting one's strengths. Because looking only what's wrong with myself can lead to absolute despair, depression, a sense that there's nothing right about me, that there's nothing good I can do. And personally, I think that this is the way one should begin. To focus before one sees, before one examines himself for what had happened, that perhaps he shouldn't have let happen. One should look at his positive character traits and positive actions and so on and so forth, and resolve to strengthen them further. Because you know you have the capacity in them because you have been successful.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to leave by saying, Rav David Yechiel, Tehei Nafsho Tzura B'Tzura Chaim. We'll miss you.
Thank you, Rabbi Brovender. Our friend and teacher, Rabbi Yitzchak Blau, can also be counted amongst the talmidim of Rabbi Ebner. He also has the distinction of having been a longtime colleague in those heady heydays of Yeshivat Hamivtar. He also enjoyed the privilege of sitting at that Rebbe's table. And he also has the schus of being the nephew of Rabbi David Ebner, Rabbi Blau.
Okay, so as Rabbi Sachs mentioned, my relationship with Rabbi Ebner had 3 stages. Okay, in my childhood, he was just a friend of my parents in the bungalow colony. And then somehow at the age of 29, when I was 29, he married my aunt and became my uncle. And then a year afterward, Rabbi Brovender was kind enough to offer me a position at Hamivtar. He became my rabbinic colleague. So I think I got to experience Rabbi Ebner from many angles. And I'd like to talk about 5 themes in Rabbi Ebner. Don't worry, I'm a concise person. 5 themes will not be that long. Okay, the first theme was a deep commitment to the truth. Okay, Rav Aviad Tabori mentioned to me that there's a certain Kutzker element to Rabbi Ebner, and that would be in a lot of facets. For example, certainly in business, he was scrupulously honest, but I think there was a truth also in the intellectual realm. Okay, as was mentioned, he taught beginners for many years. Now, he was certainly a big enough Talmid Chacham to teach more advanced students. And we could talk about different things that attracted him to the beginner's year, but I would actually say that truth was one of them. Meaning, if I give an advanced year and say fancy chidushim, okay, they could be accurate, they might be inaccurate, but when I teach beginners, Ibayit Aim and Bishlama are always going to mean what they mean. And there's a sense of a real commitment to truth there that attracts him to that. I think that's manifest in his poetry also. Okay, here's a poem which the Rav comes up in. It's in the Library of Everything. It's called Admei Esrim. And it begins, Rebbe taught of absolute presumptions, of probable cause, of issues too arcane for poetry, recondite, abstruse, upils of paradox, in which we sharpened mind razors, and here's the, in parentheses, perhaps we strove for truth. And I think one gets it there, this kind of suspicion that in this very abstract intellectualism, it might not be about the search for truth. And I think in the beginner's share, that's where it was. Another story that relates to that As Rabbi Sachs said, I had the great privilege of hearing the wisdom of Rabbi Ebner and Yitzchak Chaim Brovender at the lunch table. So I think it was Rabbi Shagar's yeshiva that came up. And I raised the following question. I said, they are interested in making Talmud more meaningful, the quest for meaning. And they also want to introduce academic perspectives. And I said, I think those two things are in conflict with each other, right? The academic perspective is not in the search for meaning. So it's a funny combination. And Rabbi Ebner said to me, no, but the academic perspective has one search for meaning, which is the quest for truth. And I think it was a powerful thing. And I think that really expressed a big portion of who Rabbi Ebner was. Okay, so that's in terms of the first theme. Okay. Oh, actually, I should point out, many people don't know that he actually wrote a doctorate on the structure of Masechet Sota. So again, I don't think he viewed himself in the world of academia. He was in the world of yeshiva, but that was part of who he was. That was a certain aspect of his personality. Okay, so that's the quest for truth. Number two, I think Rabbi Ebner combined, for lack of a better term, a certain cynicism about humanity with a love for humanity. Okay, that he was well aware of the pitfalls of the human personality, and yet somehow was able to maintain a friendliness, a hopefulness. And here I have some very good stories here. I'll go with one. I am a bit more optimistic personality than Rabbi Ebner was. So he once told me at the lunch table, Yitzi, you think you're the optimist? You're wrong. I'm the optimist. Why is that? Because I know the truth about humanity and I still talk to people. So I think that really expresses Rabbi Ebner's perspective, that he knew about the fallibility of humanity and yet insisted on treating people as people of value, of people could really accomplish. I think this was even manifest in the way he talked about people like the Rav, meaning Rabbi Ebner sometimes could be a bit cynical about the Rav, and yet he could talk about the Rav with great reverence. Okay, probably a number of you have heard this story from him. He talks about hearing the Rav intone the Kedusha when he was 15 years old, when Rav Ebner was 15 years old, and how much of a mark it made upon him. And again, getting back to the poem I quoted at Me'av Esrim, he talks about understanding what the Rav is trying to say 40 years later. So there again, you have a sense of the critical mind together with the ability to appreciate and have reverence. Again, to refer to his poetry, I would go to the Library of Everything for this, which I think is a very, very powerful poem. And what do you have there? So again, you start with kind of the difficulty of humanity. They're readers in the personal injustice betrayal reading room, right? Trying to get the evidence that will convict the brother-in-law who they couldn't stand. Okay, and then there is the history of 20th century room, where you hear the sound of teaspoons advance, where they decide on the final solution, where you smell the executioner's cigarette at Babi Yar, right, where thousands of Jews were mowed down. And yet, after all that, Rabbi Ebner says he'll go to the Breslov section and listen to Rav Nachman saying, do not despair. So that's really Rabbi Ebner. He understands very well all the problematic aspects of humanity and is able to yet find hope and optimism at the same time. Okay, that is number two. Number three, Rabbi Ebner really was a tremendously loyal friend. Okay, I think this has emerged already, and you can come with many examples. I'll just do two, maybe four. Okay, I think when Rabbi Brovender again was unfortunately beaten up in the Palestinian Authority, so Rabbi Ebner was constantly at his bedside. Okay, and when his very good friend Rabbi Binyamin Tabori, unfortunately at the end of his life, was suffering from ALS, so he and my aunt Shulamith Teitz Ebner, it's amazing how often they would go for Shabbos. I don't remember what it was, every 4 weeks, every 3 weeks, but and it wasn't so easy to interact with Rabbi Tabori at that point. Like I found it personally difficult because I couldn't understand his lip syncing, and it was hard to interact with him. But they were always there, and if they came and Rabbi Ebner, sang Mizmor David and told over a good Dvar Torah and a good funny story, so that made the Taboris happy. So that was his tremendous loyalty. You get that also. Rabbi Sachs mentioned Rabbi J. Miller, who unfortunately passed away young. Okay, Rabbi Ebner was very adamant about the annual memorial event for Rabbi Miller. Okay, it's something he cared about deeply. And finally, even the poem for Rabbi Winevsky. I think that all that shows, people who Rabbi Ebner was friendly with, he cared about deeply, and he was loyal to them and dedicated to them and wanted to do things to commemorate them. Okay, theme number 4. Rabbi Ebner was a poet, and there aren't that many poets among the world of Rabbeim in Yeshiva. Okay, in fact, I can think of about 2. Okay, so, and I think the poetry, his poetic taste, was manifest both in his own writing, of course, as was mentioned, his 3 books of poetry, but also his appreciation for the great writing of others. So, of course, he loved great poetry, right, Auden and the like, but he also, I think, appreciated rabbinic writers who could write with poetry. So many of you know, if you ask who Rabbi Ebner loved to learn, so 3 people come to mind. Okay, let's say we'll restrict it to Achronim, so that leaves out the Rambam. Okay, so I think we'd say Rav Hutner, the Sfas Emes, and Rav Nachman. I think that would be the answer. And of the 3 of them, I think perhaps he was most drawn to Rav Hutner, because Rav Hutner really was the poet of the 20th century. He was the rabbinic poet of the 20th century, both in the way he writes more poetically than other Achronim, and in the way he reads. He has tremendous sensitivity to language. And that was something that really appealed to Rabbi Ebner. So obviously his psychological insight is also part of it, but I think perhaps it is the common poetic theme that really matched them. And before I get to the 5th theme, I feel a need to quote this because he said it to me several times. I'm not going to explain the line, but I believe Rabbi Ebner used to say that Rav Hutner was Archie Goodwin trapped in the body of Nero Wolfe. I believe that is the line. Shulamith, did I get it correct? Okay. So if you can write to me later if you didn't understand it. Okay, now for the last theme. Okay, theme number 5. He was a great intelligence and wit. It was just a pleasure to sit next to him and hear all the word plays and the clever lines and the like. And I'll just mention one last story here. So I once showed him a piece in Rav Tzadok that he really appreciated, where Rav Tzadok says that the Greeks really knew what they were doing when they came up with the term philosopher. Because as we know, philosopher means lover of wisdom, right? Philosophia. And he said, Rav Tzadok says, that's what real wisdom is. Real wisdom is to be not how much you know and what you get in the SATs. It's to be a lover of wisdom. And Rav Tzadok likes it so much, he says, the Greeks, they must have stolen it from us. It's too good an idea. Okay, so, but leaving that aside, when I showed it to Rabbi Ebner, he loved it. He was ecstatic. And I think some of it is that's really who he was, right? He loved wisdom, right? Obviously, he knew a lot, and obviously he was extremely smart, but he was truly a philosopher in the sense of Ohev Chachma. So there are many more things to say, but I think the 5 themes we've conveyed here really convey who Rabbi Ebner was. A man deeply committed to truth, a man who understood all the problems of humanity and still had faith in humanity, a man who was incredibly loyal, a poetic soul who both wrote poetry and loved to read poetry, and a lover of knowledge, a true intellectual thinker and wit.
Thank you, Rabbi Blau. We have just 2 brief speakers left. Now I turn to Rabbi Todd Berman, who also had the privilege of being first a student and then a colleague at Yeshivat Hamivtar, and then for many, many years at Yeshivat Eretz Hatzvi. Todd is, I think, traveling somewhere in America, as people in the yeshiva world tend to do. So he's phoning in. Let's hope we can hear him. Todd Berman.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So I'm parked in a car. I wasn't.
Oh. Berman, are you there? Berman, we'll give you one last chance. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but maybe better without the video. Maybe that's what's causing you problem.
Oh,
but anyway, go ahead. Go ahead. Give it a try.
It wasn't you. Okay. So, without the video, fine. I can turn the video off. So I at the Hespedim, I kind of felt quite torn because there are a couple other people on here who had the same privilege that I did. I was a Talmid for many, many years, and on the other hand, a colleague at Eretz Hatzvi for so long, and I didn't know whether or not to stand with my friends from Hamivtar and from Hamivtar to stand with my talmidim in Eretz Tzvi, and kind of hovered in between the two. If I were to do this right, I guess it would be extremely brief, as those, we all remember Rabbi Ebner used to introduce people, and I think it was even said at the Hespedim, but for years and years and years, it was true at Eretz Tzvi that he would always introduce people by saying, the introduction is inversely proportionate to how much you respect them. I once, but I'll talk about the dichotomy of Hamivtar and Eretz Tzvi. I remember when someone passed away, the son was a very well-known Rav who I had a relationship with, and he turned to me and he said, they want me to speak like a rabbi, but when your parent passes away, you're a child. I feel very much that way. I was just thinking of the reason I wanted to look at the text, but when Eliyahu Hanavi ascends to Shemayim and Elisha feels so alone, I kind of feel that way. Talking about that the Sar of Israel is going up, and it was also sudden for us. I had three privileges, I guess, with Rabbi Ebner. I still remember, and I soon think my Hamivtar friends remember as well. I think the first Yichad I heard, which was 39 years ago, I think. I still remember, and I've quoted it a million times. Rabbi Ebner got up and pounded on the stender. We were at Shvut Yisrael, and we were in one of those prefab buildings. I knew nothing, and he pounded on the stender, screaming, "Have you done tshuva yet?" And that still, it's Elul, it still reverberates with me very much. I hear those sichot for all those years. And I also had that was one privilege. One other privilege was being a colleague of his. People spoke about his loyalty, incredible loyalty. But one thing that I really appreciated, and if there's any time when I feel that speaking, I learned how to speak following Rabbi Ebner, who's probably the best speaker I've ever heard. And he used to, often critique me positively and say the things that were good. And sometimes we would disagree on how to tell a Hasidic story. And he was the Rabbi and I was the Talmud. But sometimes talmidim also can rebel a little bit. I remember one time I did that. And the third aspect that I had the privilege of, which very few people had, is the precious time in the office with my dear friend Shulamith Ebner. And Rabbi Ebner would always come and hang out with us. We had the best talks in the world. And there's no doubt in my religious life, if I count on one hand the people who had the most impact on me, obviously it's Kfod Rabbeinu and Rabbi Brovender. But obviously Rabbi Ebner, sorry, I didn't expect to speak. I didn't expect to be so emotional. But Rabbi Ebner had such an impact on my life as a teacher, as a student, as a religious person. And I think that the depth of his religious personality, and I have to say, probably my favorite experience was hanging out with Shulamith and Rabbi Ebner together in the office, and we would talk about everything. Sometimes we might breach those places you shouldn't talk about during Elul, and sometimes it was about the world. And I grew so much. And I think that everybody who's on here, whether they were a colleague or a Talmud, grew incredibly. And I was, I spoke last night at Binghamton University before Slichot. I tried my best, talk about the fish trembling in the ocean and what I thought it meant to me. And I sprinkled in a little more hopefulness than Balatanya, less Musar perhaps. But I told Rabbi Sachs I would speak very briefly. I have when you have so much to say, I think when your cup overflows, then sometimes it's just the overflow. The Rav talks about this. It's the overflow you can spread, and it's so kukalo of my religious personality is built on Rabbi Ebner. And the discipline, when he took, I'll tell you a little story. Last year, I want to say it was last August, At the end, we have guys from Australia, just like Hamivtar once upon a time did, and we have guys from Australia, and they finished. Rabbi Ebner took his farm, and he said, "I'm done." And for me, that was a chapter in my life which is really really ripped up. We had chavrutot, we had experiences in schmoozing about everything under the sun, from poetry to New Yorker articles to trends in university campuses to Rabbi Nachman, and all, everything. I know Rav Yitzi, he and I, Rav Yitzi Blau, my friend, he and I never were colleagues on the same yeshiva faculty, although I taught at Hamivtar a little before him. But when you mentioned about Rabbi Nachman and Rav Hudner, there's no doubt that's those are chavrutot that I had. I can recall that the only reason I know any Rav Hudner is because Rabbi Ebner introduced me to him. The only Rabbi Nachman I know, and the only Sfas Emes I know, and the only Tanya I know, which had become such an integral part of my life, is because of being introduced to them by Rabbi Ebner, either in Sichot or especially in Chavrutot over the ages, and just the profound effect on me. I'm sure everyone who's listening is so overwhelming. It's like the drops overflowing out of a kos, and I just I'm sad I didn't get a chance. I visited him in the hospital very briefly. I had no idea how fast everything was going to go, and I just wish I'd had the opportunity to express my Hakar Satov, my deep Hakar Satov, for him and his wife. And since Rabbi Brovner's here, I'll say that as well. And I'm certain others feel that way. But I just want to say to him that they always that it has been a kura. We always ask mechila. So the mechila I'm going to ask is I didn't get a chance to really express my deep Hakar Satov. I don't think my religious life and everything I give to my talmidim would be a drop in the bucket, and I'd had the experience of being a talmid of Rabbi Ebner for all those years. And I'm sure I speak for many people that way. And thank you, Rabbi Sachs, for giving me the opportunity to at least express a little bit. I hope Emir Hashem to write something up that's more elucidated, perhaps, and it spreads more. But this is Masha Yotzei Ben Alev. Really, and Shulamith, who's here, I saw that she's still on. My heart goes out to you, as you know. The office is empty without you, and the basement is empty without your husband, and and my life is much more empty without Rabbi Ebner there to speak to consult with, to listen to learn from. And may, like Rabbi Berman said, may his neshama be Tzur Chaim.
Thank you, Rabbi Berman. Shulamith, we hope this gathering of talmidim, people who learned with and loved Rabbi Ebner, we hope that you and the children, the Ebner children, the Resnick children, the whole larger family find peace of nechama from what we've said here tonight. When he published the Library of Everything, the dedication was for Shulamith, who inspires mashal, who is mashal le'inyan hazeh. And I won't unpack the meaning of that, but I think we understand how profoundly you lifted him, inspired him, helped the poetry sing, enabled him for all these years to continue doing the work that he did, that touched so many lives, neshamot, students, talmidim, minds and hearts. And we all know what you meant to him. We think we know what you meant to him. We know how we all benefited from that. And I'm very grateful that you've agreed to say a few words to the talmidim and all those assembled. You have to unmute yourself. Oh, there you are. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
I think Ezra did his magic. I think so. It's interesting, but if you look behind me, for one of my birthdays, my husband I have a daughter who's an artist. He had her calligraph an important section of Perek Yod of Hilchos Tshuva from the Rambam. And in large gold letters at the bottom, it says, Mashal, the Inyan Zeb. You're all welcome to come to my house and see it. It's a source of pride and love. And when I look out at the array of beloved students who've come to pay tribute to my husband's memory, I'm overwhelmed by the thought that you were each very precious to him. During the Shiva, so many of you came to be Menachem Avol. There were those who even flew in from the United States and England just to sit with us, to reminisce, and to cry together. You are a tremendous source of comfort. But I must admit that every time I looked out on the visitors and recalled what joy each of you gave my husband in your unique relationship with him, I couldn't help thinking what nachas he would have had to see you, talk to you, and catch up with you on your progress in life. You know, when I was in law school, I recall that our professor for evidence warned us that in our practice, when a client came to speak to us, and I quote, "You take your plaintiff as he comes. Don't rewrite his or her version of the facts, but accept the plaintiff's story as he or she presents it and deal with it." I think that for all of my husband's students, he worked with you as you came. He didn't try to rewrite your personal story. Rather, he listened ever so carefully and allowed you to express your feelings, your experiences, and whatever it was that was on your heart and in your head, so that he could work with you to understand yourself better and move forward successfully in your lives. For me personally, I can only say that we were blessed to have our 29 years together, Baruch Hashem. We actually knew each other since we were 17 years old, but it took us a few years to figure out how to begin the successful act 2 of our lives. We were so fortunate to have had such blessing. My husband told me that when Rav Aaron Lichtenstein eulogized Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, Rav Aaron said that even if Rav Shlomo Zalman had not been the formidable gadol that he certainly was, in fact, even if he would have been the greatest Am Haaretz, he still would have been the kindest, most compassionate, most benevolent person on earth. I believe that the same can be said of my husband. One time, when Rav Shlomo Zalman's wife needed to see the doctor because she was suffering from pain, the Rav explained to the doctor that our foot is hurting. The day before David became ill, I fell in front of our house and broke my femur. I called my husband to come and help me. When he saw me on the ground, he fainted, but he roused himself. And despite his extreme distress, he quickly called Hatzalah and got me to the hospital. Indeed, we were both immensely fortunate. But now I have lost my greatest love and my best protector. In a beautiful poem by Dylan Thomas entitled, "And Death Shall Have No Dominion," he brilliantly expresses a profound idea, which, over the course of the next years, I will do my best to internalize and remember always. Though lovers be lost, love shall not, and death shall have no dominion. Chaval al David, lo mishtachin, teinav shows for Rabbi Tzor HaChaim. Thank you.
Thank you, Shulamith. And death shall have no dominion. Bila hamoves lanetzach. From David Ebner, so many talmidim, so many years, decades of teaching. We think, of course, and he often said that the first line in the obituary after beloved husband, devoted father, was Mashgiach Ruchani of Yeshivat Hamivtar, despite his many other important accomplishments at other institutions. And we should mention, of course, that for a number of years he also taught the Midrash at Lindenbaum, or back then it was Michal Bruria, actually, in the days when it was easy to go back and forth between the two institutions. In a symposium that he authored a column for in Tradition, which ironically was edited by Dr. Rivka Blau, who I think is sitting there with you, Shulamith, before
Yes.
she became his sister-in-law, asking about the state of the Orthodox world. He commented that in response to a question about the state of women's education, that if the revolution, so-called revolution in women's education, has achieved the fact that women now have the same struggle to, make sense of a single line of Gemara. If we're producing women who are as big Amei Haaretz as the men, then we haven't really succeeded in much, and we need rather a revolution in Jewish education for men, for women, for everyone, which he was such an important part of. Thank you to all who participated. The formal part of our program is over, although I will remind people that, as I mentioned, at WebYeshiva.org/Hamivtar, we are housing a lot of shiurim from Rabbi Ebner and from all of the great teachers throughout the years. And a number of other links have been posted in the chat with other recording shiurim, including some that are archived at yutorah.org. And friends from the old yeshiva days should be sure to follow us on Facebook to keep up to date with happier things in the larger world of Yeshivat Hamivtar, which still lives in all of us. And I hope that soon we'll have a chance to meet together for happier occasions, to learn from our teachers, to learn from each other, to see the old friends, to see the chavrusas, and to remember what was really so remarkable about that institution. Tam Shidurenu, but we will leave the classroom open, and we welcome people to share memories and thoughts. You can open your microphone. Just be careful not to speak over each other, and we would, of course, ask everybody to keep it brief, a minute or two each. Of course, people that want to write and share more substantive memories with Shulamith and the family are welcome to do so. You can send them to her directly, or you can send them to her through us, and we'll make sure that she and the family get that. Thank you all for joining us.
Me?
Go ahead.
So you had kindly asked me to say a
just
few
introduce yourself, Rabbi Robinson, and we wish you and send you the heartiest, most sincere refuah shlema.
Thank you so much. And you asked me the other day to say a few words, and I certainly didn't feel up to it, but just this has been so moving and so affecting. And I just want to add something which I haven't heard anybody add, because maybe it's a sort of the minor key to his incredible educational accomplishments. But he was, although as Shulamith, and we wish you the very best, and so many condolences and strength, but his kindness and compassion. I remember one day, 7 years, a little bit longer, and one day, and it must have been early on, I don't know if I was still in his shir, but he was a mashgiach of the yeshiva, and I just was sort of complaining out loud that I didn't know what to do next year. I didn't know whether to become an accountant, to get a graduate degree, to become a lawyer, anything. And he said, I can help you. You should talk. I can help you with that. And of course he did. And that began many, many personal conversations. And and I still have my level 1 Gemara. I was showing it to Rabbi Moshe Lichtenstein the other day, Vadi Yeshiva's Gemara, with the words that we would be given, the vocabulary list written in every day. But as well as the educational molding, his kindness and compassion and willingness to make time and to go out and to be there and just help people who he knew were lost or floundering were just the most profound. And the depth of gratitude for everybody in this call is beyond words, and we'll never forget him.
The floor is open for anyone else that would like to grab the microphone. You can just unmute yourself.
Perhaps if I could share a
Sure, just Adam,
thought.
introduce yourself.
Yeah,
Maybe people just introduce yourself and say when you encountered him, when you were in the yeshiva, what your connection was.
So I was in Hamivtar when Hamivtar was on Elazar. I'm based here in England, and I think a phrase which was just mentioned was one which resonated with me last night when I spoke at Slichot, of that phrase "Devarim yotzim min halev nichnasim lalev," and I would add on to that perhaps with Rabbi Ebner that it's also "Devarim yotzim min haneshama yotzim leneshama." The time was the summer of 1988, sitting in the Bet Midrash of Hamivtar, which was the Bet Knesset of Moshav Elazar, as it was at the time. And Rabbi Ebner was giving one of his Mussar Shmuzen, and the story, and it was told as it was engaging as a story. Every part of what he was saying was so well played out that you could follow each and every part of it. And then a few months later, I'm back in England. I'm working a few jobs in order to be able to pay for the experiences I was blessed to have when as being in Israel. And this particular story that he told ends with the fact that a person who didn't have any muzzle when in anything that he did, there was the chance to be able to go to an island and be able to get diamonds, because the island was bedecked with diamonds, but it would take a year to get there, a year to stay there, and a year to get back. And he does this. He decides to do this. And when he gets there, he actually gets involved with the life of the place, which was the big thing there was cooking oil. And so instead, of getting the diamonds, he starts to get the cooking oil, and he finds the best way of being able to get cooking oil. And then at the end of the year, he brings barrels and barrels and barrels back, because this is the thing which was most important. On the way to the boat at the end of the year, he realizes, I came here to get diamonds. He bends down, picks one up, and then gets on the boat. All of the oil goes rancid on the journey back and gets thrown overboard. He comes back, and his wife sees that he's a broken man yet again. And so he cries himself to sleep. She goes to the pockets, and he sees this diamond that he picked up from the beach on the way to the boat. And she says, Reb Yid. Says Reb Yid because even she didn't know his name, was the comment that he made. He said, Reb Yid, we're made. This will be able to see us into our future. And the answer that the man gave was, but you don't know what I left behind. And this was clamoring inside my head in the time that the time after being in yeshiva, and the time trying to find out the derech that I would take. If you don't know what you have left behind, and the reason why it resonated, it was true, it was honest, it was devarim hayotzim min halev nichnasim lalev. It wasn't with any side, it wasn't with anything apart from the love of Yahadut, the love of people, the love of Artzena HaKdosha. And just to finish, I contacted Rabbi Ebner a short while back, as my son had started as a madrich in Eretz Tzvi, and the joy that he had, the fact that there was this continued association. Again, it's not something which could be falsified. It was something which was true. It was something which was emet. And I think that the words that would describe Rabbi Ebner has to be soulful and heartful and just so connected to emet and to ahavat ha'am and ahavat habriot.
Thank you, Rabbi Hill.
Shulamith, Jeremy Roston here. I forget the dates when I was in yeshiva. I left yeshiva in '93. I'm not sure exactly when. I'm in London now. I just wanted to share a little story with you. I sat next to Rabbi Ebner for years, and so there must be loads of stories, but they don't come to me now. But there was one that was just really interesting. When I passed the Rabbanut Smicha and I got the news that I'd passed the Issa V'Heta, I remember I was in the yeshiva and Rabbi Edmund was there. I think it was even the evening. I don't know why he was there, exactly what the story was. And I told him, I think he was the first person I told. And his response was, "You're a rabbi. Go tell your wife you're a rabbi." That was it. Go tell your wife you're a rabbi. He was just thinking one stage of chesed further, you know? Tell your wife. I just thought I'd let you know. Hi, Seth.
Okay, so we'll go to Moshe Morris next. Mazal tov to you, Rabbi Morris.
Thank you very much. I'm Moshe Morris. I was in yeshiva from 93 to 98, so I know for a fact that Jeremy Roston did not leave the yeshiva in 93. And there's two things I'd like to share. One was I actually left the yeshiva at this point, and there was a shaila I had to ask somebody. And I called up Rabbi Ebner, and we had a conversation, and I wanted an answer. Like that, I wanted to know. I had a doubt, and I wanted to know what to do. And his answer to me was, "You've been involved in this long enough that you can figure out that you'll be able to figure out what to do. You have it within you." And he said it. Sometimes those types of answers would frustrate me, but not that time, and not the way he said it. Because what he was saying to me is that I have inside me a capability that I'm not aware of. And he's showing trust in me. And he's showing me to trust myself. And that answer wasn't just an answer for that particular question. It's something that I learned more and more in life, that oftentimes I have something in me that I didn't realize. If I can tap into it, I can figure it out. And that was a gift he gave me. And to add to the gifts, this whole week, I found out after the Levaya, so I wish I had been to the Levaya, but I listened to all the Hespedim, coming and paying Shiva call, reading all the memorials and listening to a shir. And I've kind of discovered a little bit that he's become my Rebbe a little bit again this week. And I just found myself davening with a song. Not just getting through davening, but singing it. He had his song and tapping into my song again. And my Torah was a little bit, I don't know, there was something there. And it's amazing that a Rebbe can be a Rebbe years and years and years after you've left the shir classroom. And I just want to say thank you. And Rabbi Sachs and Rabbi Bravo and everybody, thank you for all this also. It was really moving and amazing. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi Moshe Morris. There's Shabtai Atlo.
I'm Shabtai Atlo. I was in Yeshivat Hamivtar starting in 1984 in Kiryat Moshe, from Kiryat Moshe to Elazar, from Elazar to Efrat, from Efrat to Elazar. The Galuyot of the Sanhedrin. I followed the yeshiva for many years, and I was zoche to learn a lot from Rabbi Ebner, to the point where when I was no longer in yeshiva and I was working at NDS, for those of you that are familiar with NDS, there's a publication called Kedushay Torah at NDS, and I wrote an article about Rav Hutner and the relationship between Ben Torah and someone who's working. And many years later, I went back and read the article, and I actually met Rabbi Ebner, and I said to him, "You are so deeply ingrained in me that I was quoting you almost verbatim from some of your sichot, and I didn't even realize how much." And to this day, I still, and I would be very surprised if I'm the only person To this day, I'm still coming. I know Rosh Hashanah is coming. I'm going to be doing, again, as I was since every year since 1984, the 10 Prakim of Hilchot Tshuva, B'schut Rabbi Ebner. And again, it's ingrained in me. And when I go through it, I hear it, and I hear Rabbi Ebner shirim. And I was asked to speak on the night of Kol Nidre in my shul this year. And without even thinking, I said, fine, I will speak the 10th parak of Hilchot Tshuva, Ahava, the 10th parak of Hilchot Tshuva. Then Rabbi Ebner halach lo lamo. And I remembered I have MP3 files of his, the Divrei David. I sent them to Rabbi Sachs. And I go back and look at them myself, and what's there? Avat Hashem and Yom Kippur. Exactly what I was going to say is there. He is so much my Rebbe that he's become a part of me that I don't even realize how much. Just like I said when I became a parent, said I open my mouth and I hear my parents' voice coming. I hear things my parents say coming out of my mouth. I open my mouth and I hear Rabbi Ebner coming out of my mouth. As all of the Torah that we've all internalized of his should just bring an aliyah to his neshama.
Thank you. Shabtai, when I came to yeshiva, you were an older guy, and you said to me on Rosh Hashanah, we have to learn the 10 prakim of Hilchot Tshuva together. That's what Rabbi Ebner tells us to do. And like you and so many others, I've kept that up every single Seres Tshuva. We have time for another one or maybe two brief comments.
This is Mikey Sunshine.
Or Mikey.
I was in the yeshiva a couple of times. The first 96, 97, and Jeremy Rustin, you were there. I remember you. I was a young guy. A lot of things that everybody said are also my experiences too. So I had just a couple other ones. One, I loved the shir because while the learning of the Gemara was learning how to think, and strive for truth. That the minutes, which meant half an hour and often 45 minutes of learning Mesilat Yesharim, was about learning about life. And Rabbi Ebner, at some point, I realized he mentioned this, that he was learning Mesilat Yesharim and talking to himself and allowing us to be a part of that conversation with himself. And another, I have so many memories, but I'll make it short. We went to Ramat, I think it was Ramat HaNadiv. And I think it was the time when there were 18-year-olds in the yeshiva, and I was just out of college. And I came in and I wanted to learn, and I was very focused on being not fun, I think. And we were in Ramat HaNadiv, and Rabbi Ebner was running around and being exceptionally silly. I wouldn't say he was acting like a kid, he was acting like a teenager. And it really was a great lesson to me that to have a sense of silliness and joy of life about you. And so there was that, and it was all part of just the wholesomeness and the wholeness of the person, was the strive for truth and the soaring of the neshama and the greatness of the human intellect and mind, and also about it's the joy of life.
Hi, this is Marcus Freed. I'm here in sunny London. I was in the yeshiva 96 to 97 during the Sunshine, Roston, Bruce years, and many more. And what really just struck me, as I said earlier, this idea of being accepted completely and accepted wholly. And so whenever I went off on flights of fancies over the years, Rabbi Ebner was always there, not just into it, but fully committed. So when I was going into yoga and Torah, and I'd say, Rabbi Ebner, can I say this? Can I say this? He'd then call me up with yoga chidushim. And so he said, as we're going to be saying, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, with Shir Hamala Mema Akim Karaticha Hashem, he'd say, Marcus, you can teach that calling out from the depths is from the depths of your lungs, and you can use that for the breath on the yoga mat. So then I go and teach that one. And then later on, we'd be talking about plays, whether we're in London or Israel or wherever it was. And we're discussing theatrical techniques. And I sent him a book on David Mamet on playwriting. And he was planning to write a play, been talking about for years, on Rav Yisrael Salante in Paris. And what just really struck me was, obviously we know Aselach HaRav, but when you take a friend on, can the rabbi be a friend? Because he very much felt like a true friend as well as a rabbi on so many levels. And I don't know if this is normal in other yeshivas, but I'm so glad I went to Hamivtar and so glad to have been in his shir and call him my Rabbi.
Rabbi Sachs?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Daniel.
This is Daniel Bonner. I just say a couple from New York, studied in Yeshivat Eretz Tzvi from 2008 to 2009. I'll just share a couple of quick thoughts. The first is, when I was a student in yeshiva, a number of us, we were not perfect human beings, and we found ourselves at a party we shouldn't have been at, and were upbraided for it the next day by Rabbi Ebner. The best part of that story is that for the last 10 or 11 or 12, I lost track years, I had the privilege of learning the Sfas Emes with him every Wednesday morning. And he would, over the last few years, about once a year, bring that story up and tell me about these students one year in yeshiva who went to this party, and he described the details of the party. And I had the privilege of reminding him every year that I was one of the participants in that experience, which he could not believe, and then said to me, as long as you're on an upward trajectory of growth, it's okay. We don't have to talk about it anymore. He once shared with me, I was looking over my notes over the weekend, a quote from Rav Itzela Volozhiner, who was asked by the secular authorities, when do you begin the Jewish education of your child? And he responded, 20 years before he's born. Almost 20 years ago that I met Rabbi Ebner. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we've been learning together for the last decade, a little more than that. And when we had the privilege of having him as the Mesader Kedushin at our wedding a couple of years ago, with Mrs. Ebner as well, who we are so grateful could be there. And then when our son was born, just a little under a year ago, I brought him to his first chavruta. Sorry. And Rabbi Ebner said, this is when a chavruta becomes a chabura. And it was an amazing gift to have those moments one-on-one, and then eventually the three of us over the last year. And I was thinking in davening this morning how his voice reverberates in my mind, because so much of what the Sfas Emes has to say, and Rabbi Sachs, I would just fight for the Sfas Emes' honor. And my personal view, that was the text that he connected most with, at least in more recent years. That when you say the words Hu asanu v'lo anachnu, I'm thinking about Rabbi Ebner teaching us Sfas Emes. Chi tani miyar divor, I'm thinking about Rabbi Ebner talking about Yosef. Almost every page, I have a chance to hear his voice again. So thank you for the chance to say something about him. Thank you to everybody here for keeping his memory alive, and thank you most importantly to Mrs. Ebner for being an extraordinary partner to him.
Thank you, Daniel. It's nice for all of us Hamivtar people to also hear the voices of the Eretz Tzvi talmidim. Effie Unterman had asked to say a few words. Effie, are you still online with us?
I guess I'll represent Torah Shraga students for one magical year.
I almost forgot.
Yeah. For one magical year, which really is a hashgacha pratis for the 11 of us who were there. We had Rabbi Brovender and Rabbi Ebner as our Rebbeim. And for the 24 years since, he's been a very close personal Rebbe and friend of mine. There for me in every important and often the unimportant moments of my life, and a chavrusa every week for the last 10 years since Rabbi Chassin passed away. And I guess I'll just say three quick things. One is that we also learned Sfas Emes. We learned Rabbi Nachman. Our first chavrusa in yeshiva was in the Rambam. Then we learned Rabbi Nachman for a year, and then Sfas Emes for 9 years. And one of the things that I learned from him is that you can only get so much from books. You can be a great scholar and memorize all the words, and the books are still there, the footnotes are still there. But to be able to learn with someone with a neshama who just gets it is a completely irreplaceable gift. And part of the great loss is that of losing a Rebbe is someone who really gets it, gets the Torah, gets the words, and also gets you. And that cannot be replaced. I was having coffee with him once on a trip to Israel, and a wife of my friend showed up. I had back-to-back coffee dates. So we overlapped. This friend of my wife just wanted to see me. So she got to see Rabbi Ebner for 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, he became her Rebbe. Like she felt more seen by Rabbi Ebner than almost any other rabbinic presence in her life to that point, in those 5 minutes. And it's not even a story about me, but it's a story I got to watch. And every time I interacted with her since then, she asked me about Rabbi Ebner. I think they even met once after that. Unbelievable the impact he could have on someone in just 5 minutes because of the care and love he really had for every person he interacted with and everyone who became really a Talmid. The absolute love and excitement. He used to say how he saw Rav Hutner in the end of his years when he started to give shiur completely come to life. He could come into the room in a very decrepit fashion, but as he began teaching Torah, then Ruach came back into him. And you saw Rabbi Ebner come to life in chavrusas, just the joy and the light coming out of his eyes and out of his heart, as we learned with him, was one of that you can't record in the notes, and it may not even be recorded in the audio, but to be there, to watch it, to witness it, to feel it, was just beyond. To all the grandchildren in the room, and I guess this is the last thing I'll share, there's words cannot capture it. There's so many words to say. We all felt the preciousness he felt our time together was so precious. We knew it. I mean, he has so many chavrusas, but if a doctor's appointment or something, made him reschedule, but he would bend over backwards to still try to find the time to learn. He didn't want to use the time. We knew how precious it was. I have to tell you, if there's a grandchildren in the room here, if he got a call from a grandchild, or a grandchild came into the house while we were learning, it was like another level. Like we all felt the love and the excitement and the joy of learning together. It was beyond what we could access in our real lives. A grandchild came to the house and boy, it exploded. And suddenly he was gone off the screen for 10 minutes. And I could hear the conversation in the background, and he'd come back. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Grandchild came. Everything has to drop for that. Everything drops for that. So I just wanted to express how much we saw the love that he had for his talmidim, for people he knew, for the Torah he learned, and also for his family, just beyond. And was something that we got to see and grow from. I'll be forever thankful to Rabbi Ebner and to those who helped these yeshivas come together. Rabbi Ebner, thank you so much for allowing him the time to change our lives.
Thank you, Effie. Perhaps if there's one last person who would like to share something, and then we'll wrap it up for now.
It's Elliot Kay from London. I was in the yeshiva in 93, 94, and had the great success of being able to, together with Phil Shire, who I think was also on the chat before, bring Rabbi Ebner to Leeds University for what we think was the first ever student Yarchei Kala. We took over a room in the student union. And Rabbi Ebner came and stayed for a week, and we basically turned it into a base medrash. There are two stories that I just wanted to share, which both really encapsulated my relationship with Rabbi Ebner, and I think so many people. First of all, the base medrash that we set up, as I said, was within the student union building. And on the floor below was the student bar, which in those days, and if it still is, had the extraordinary accolade of being the longest bar in Europe, right? The most taps that were able to be drunk from. And one day, Rabbi Ebner got in the elevator to come into the building and obviously hit the wrong button. And he opened the elevator doors, and rather than walking to the base medrash, he walked into the bar. And he immediately came, obviously he realized he was in the wrong place, and he immediately came upstairs, and whatever we were learning, he stopped us, and we all had to sing Baruch Elokeinu she'bronech v'hivd l'anu min ha'torah v'noson teres, and he got us all singing this song because he had this. He used to say he had a Kabbalah that when he thought of something, he had to share it at that exact moment. And I remember his face, this beaming face, that he realized this incredible juxtaposition between us upstairs learning Torah and everyone downstairs, as it were, doing something else. And the story that he left us with at the end of that week was the story, and he shared it many times in Yeshiva, of Eisel Chorev, which I think was one of my favorite stories of his. When Eisel Chorev went to Volozhin, I think it was, to look for a son-in-law, and he came with this massive, massive kasha, and he said, if anyone can answer this question, then they will have these chusud to be my son-in-law. And he asked this one, and this one came up with an idea, and nobody got it. So eventually, Rabbi Zacharev left, and as Rabbi Ebner always used to do, he would sing the coach out, and I remember his voice, he would sing it out. And he told the story that one bocher ran up to the coach, the horses, and he probably told us that Alexei was driving the carriage at the time. And this one bocher said, well, what was the answer? What was the answer? Rabbi Zacharev turned around to this young man and said, you're going to be my son-in-law. And he turned around to us all and he said, sometimes it's not about knowing the answer. It's about wanting to know the answer. And that for me encapsulates him. And I just wanted to share that. And also just to say hi to Rabbi Brovender, Mrs. Brovender, and so many of my Rebbeim. I saw Rabbi Schrader also on the line of Rabbi Sussman. And so thank you all for everything you did for us and for all the talmidim in the yeshiva.
Thank you, Elliot. This could have been the whole week. I've been so tearful, and I found our time together tonight so uplifting. And I guess that's what he would have wanted. He would have taken the depression of this experience and found comfort in the idea that we've all been uplifted by our learning together and our sharing memories together. And if all of us will, encounter, do the wrestling, have the quarrel with tshuva just a little bit more strongly this Elul, and if our davening on Rosh Hashanah will be a little have his nigunim, we'll hear his nigunim in the davening, and if we'll all learn that 10th parak of tshuva a bit more deeply, so then I think that'll bring him nachas ruach, and it'll bring us all a lot of comfort. We hope we'll all gather together online, in person, on happier occasions. We wish you all ksiva v'chasima tova, shana tova. I'm sure on behalf of Rabbi Brovender, I'm sure he joins me in saying how meaningful this was for all of us. And I'll echo what others have said in wishing Rabbi Brovender ongoing chizuk and strength and special nechama as he has suffered this loss in a personal way, a stronger way than many can imagine. Shana Tova.